cyber positions, and as of August 2017, the department has only assigned employment codes to 79% of its identified cyber positions. Further, while DHS has identified cyber workforce capacity and capability gaps, it has not submitted to Congress and the U.S. Office of Personnel Management required reports on critical needs aligned with the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education's National Cybersecurity Workforce Framework. Congress has acted to provide DHS with the tools to help meet the workforce needs demanded by the current cyber threat environment. The Department's failure to utilize these tools is unacceptable. Bureaucratic delays in hiring the personnel needed to secure our nation's cyberspace are detrimental to our national security. Sadly, the failure to properly implement cyber-related hiring authorities is emblematic of the systemic hiring issues continuing to plague the Department. A management report released by DHS's Office of the Inspector General last fall aptly summarized that the Department and its components continue to encounter significant hiring difficulties related to long hire times and a lack of human resource staff, automated system, and processes to determine needed staff. Just last week, the Oversight and Management Efficiency Subcommittee heard testimony on the ineffectiveness and delays associated with the Department's fitness determination process, an integral part of the contract workforce's onboarding process. These problems are especially alarming given the significant responsibilities facing DHS as it prepares to meet cyber workforce needs and undertake the border security-related hiring surge mandated by the President. I want to thank our panel for testifying this afternoon, and I look forward to hearing an update on the Department's implementation of Public Law 113-277's requirements, as well as how DHS Management Directorate is working with components to improve the hiring process. I thank you and yield back the ballots.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now welcomes and recognizes the chairman of the full committee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall.
Thank you, Chairman Ratcliffe and Ranking Member Correa. For your leadership on this very vital issue. Everyday nation-state actors such as Russia, China, Iran, and other cyber criminals are increasingly hacking into U.S. companies and government networks to conduct espionage or steal intellectual property. With tens of millions of Americans relying on computer networks and IT for both personal and professional reasons, the risk apply to almost everyone. Recognizing these threats, I made strengthening the cybersecurity mission at the Department of Homeland Security one of my top priorities as chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security. It's an issue that has united both parties, and I'm proud to say that we've accomplished a great deal. Just this morning, the full committee passed a bill that would strengthen the ability of our cyber response teams to react to attacks on America's critical infrastructure. This past December, the House approved my landmark bill to create a standalone operational organization to elevate the cybersecurity mission of DHS. In recent years, we passed both bills that clarified the cybersecurity roles and authorities between the Department of Homeland Security and OMB and the FBI and NSA, and strengthened the cyber threat information sharing system with liability protection as well. And in 2014, we passed an important bill to expedite hiring authority at the department to bolster its cyber security workforce. At that time, I believe it was made clear that this authority would help combat cyber threats. I must say, though, unfortunately, the department has never used this hiring authority. This hearing today will focus on some of the reasons for this delay. With the number of threats that continue to gather by the day, I do find this a bit disturbing. One of our responsibilities as members of this committee is oversight and to make sure that the department is fully implementing the workforce authorities that we provided here in the Congress. To combat cybersecurity threats, we need DHS to hire the best possible workforce because there's just too much at stake. I'm hopeful, always in a positive, productive way, though, that we can learn why this delay has happened. And I look forward to working with the department, as always, and other members of our committee to make sure that these authorities that we have granted the department are being used. When it comes to Homeland Security, I think the American people need to have the best possible workforce in place. And while I do find this delay troubling, I also want to commend all three of you for the work that you do day in and day out, at the NCIC. I hope I'm hearing positive things that the Senate will actually pass our Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection Agency bill, which will elevate and prioritize the mission of cybersecurity within the department. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the chairman. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are pleased to have a very distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this important topic. Mr. Gregg Shusun is the Director of Information Security Issues for the Government Accountability Office. He leads cybersecurity and privacy-related audits of the federal government and critical infrastructure. Thank you for taking the time for being here from what I'm sure is a very busy caseload. Ms. Angela Bailey is the Chief Human Capital Officer in the Management Directorate at DHS. Ms. Bailey came to DHS from the Office of Personnel Management. I look forward to hearing how OPM and DHS can work more in unison on cyber workforce issues. And finally, Ms. Rita Moss is the Director of the Office of Human Capital at the National Protection and Programs Directorate at DHS. She attended the United States Naval Academy. We thank her for her service there, and thank you for being here before our committees today. I'd now ask all three of our witnesses to stand, raise your right hand so I can swear you in to testify. Do each of you swear or affirm that the testimony which you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. You all may be seated. The witnesses' full written statements will appear in the record. The chair now recognizes Mr. Shusun for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Chairman Ratcliffe, Chairman Perry, Chairman McCall, and Ranking Member Correa. Thank you for the opportunity to appear at today's hearing to discuss the Department of Homeland Security's efforts to strengthen its cybersecurity workforce. My testimony is based on a report we issued last month on DHS's actions to identify and report on cybersecurity positions and its specialty areas of critical need, as called for by the Homeland Security Cybersecurity Workforce Assessment Act of 2014. Before I proceed, if I may, I would like to recognize members of my audit team who were instrumental in developing my statement and conducting the work underpinning it. Tammy Kalugden and David Hong, who are with me today, led this work, while Chris Curry, Ben Atwater, Alexander Andreg, Wayne Emilian, and Luis Rodriguez made significant contributions. DHS has made important progress in identifying, categorizing, and assigning employment codes to its cybersecurity positions. For example, as of December 2016, it reported identifying about 10,725 positions. However, the department's actions have neither been timely nor complete. Procedures established by DHS to perform these activities were issued 13 months past the due date specified in the 2014 Act and did not include steps for identifying position vacancies as the Act required. The Act also required DHS to assign employment codes created by OPM to all of its cybersecurity positions. This action was to be completed by September 2015. However, as of August 2017, 23 months after the due date, the department had not completed the coding assignment process. In August 2017, the Office of Personnel Management reported to Congress that DHS had coded 95% of the department's identified cybersecurity positions. Yet we determined that only 79% of the positions were coded. The 95% estimate was overstated because DHS excluded uncoded vacant positions. DHS has taken steps to identify its workforce capability gaps and reported these to Congress in March 2017. However, it did not identify or report to Congress its critical cybersecurity critical needs using the work categories and specialty areas defined in the National Cybersecurity Framework. In addition, the department has not annually reported its critical needs to OPM as required and has not developed plans with clearly defined timeframes for reporting. To assist the department, we made 6 recommendations in our February report. For example, we recommended that DHS develop procedures on how to identify and code vacant cybersecurity positions and develop guidance for identifying specialty areas of critical need. To help clarify responsibility and provide accountability, we recommended that the department identify for each component the individual who is responsible for leading the component's efforts in performing the workforce assessment activities. And we also recommend that each component's procedures for identifying and coding cyber positions be reviewed to ensure consistency with departmental guidelines. DHS concurred with our recommendations and estimated that it would implement them all by June 2018. Implementing our recommendations should better position the department in meeting the requirements of the Homeland Security Cybersecurity Workforce Assessment Act and help DHS to better understand its needs for recruiting, hiring, developing, and retaining a cybersecurity workforce with the skills necessary to accomplish the department's varied and essential cybersecurity mission. Until it does, DHS may lack assurance that it has the data necessary to effectively manage the recruitment and retention of a cybersecurity workforce that is responsible for protecting departmental and federal networks, as well as the nation's critical infrastructure from cyber threats. This concludes my opening statement. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shusun. The chair now recognizes Ms. Bailey for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Ratcliffe, Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Richmond, and Ranking Member Correa, and distinguished members of the subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to address cybersecurity workforce issues at the Department of Homeland Security. As Secretary Nielsen described during her November 2017 confirmation hearing, cyber attacks against our federal networks and the control systems that run our critical infrastructure are continually increasing, with attacks growing ever more complex and each more sophisticated than the last. Cyber criminals and nation states are continually looking for ways to exploit our hyperconnectivity and reliance on IT systems. Our enemies will not rest, and neither will we. The Department cannot strengthen the nation's cybersecurity and successfully confront the threats Secretary Nielsen described without the creativity, intellect, and dedication of world-class cybersecurity experts. For that reason, supporting the human capital needs of the Department's cybersecurity workforce is a top priority for senior leadership, including me. I recognize the difficulty of securing the right cybersecurity talent today and tomorrow, but we must proceed with urgency and ingenuity. I am committed to thoroughly understanding our workforce requirements and implementing the best possible human capital solutions to recruit, retain, and manage the cybersecurity talent our mission demands. My team and I are working closely with human capital and cybersecurity leadership across the department, including the National Protection and Programs Directorate, the DHS Chief Information Officer, and our component CIOs on 3 priorities. 1, analyze and plan for our complex set of cybersecurity talent needs. 2, recruit and retain the highly qualified employees with capabilities vital to mission success. And 3, innovate by implementing a new 21st century personnel system to revolutionize cybersecurity talent management. I am working with the Deputy Undersecretary for Management, the Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity and Communications, the CIO, and the Cyber Workforce Coordinating Council to finalize the personnel system. The Secretary, in coordination with the Director of OPM, is also working to prescribe regulations for the administration of the new system. While we engage in the regulatory process, we are dedicated to a host of technical human capital analysis, policy development, and change management activities to ensure we launch a system that will be legally defensible, better reflect the needs of high-caliber cybersecurity talent, and enhance the Department's ability to execute its mission. The implementation effort has momentum, and I am committed to making our new cybersecurity personnel system operational. I would like to increase our collaboration with Congress, including these subcommittees, to keep you informed of the progress. Thank you again for our continued support of the Department's cybersecurity responsibilities and the employees charged with executing them. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. The chair now recognizes Ms. Moss for 5 minutes.
Chairman Ratcliffe, Chairman Perry, Ranking Member Correa, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. The Department of Homeland Security serves a critical role in safeguarding and securing cyberspace, a core Homeland Security mission. DHS's National Protection and Programs Directorate, Nppd, leads the nation's efforts to ensure the security and resilience of our cyber and physical infrastructure. I am the Human Resources Director for Nppd with almost 25 years of leadership experience in federal human capital. I came to DHS just over a year ago. In this role, I am responsible for planning, developing, directing, and evaluating Nppd's human capital strategy and operations. As a component of DHS, we are very much aligned with the department's approach and guidance in effectively recruiting and retaining cyber security talent, which is in high demand in government as well as in the private sector and is a key imperative of the Nppd mission. Nppd has been working closely with the department in developing systems and programs to effectively recruit and retain cybersecurity talent. We are thoroughly engaged at every level in the design and development of the new personnel system for cyber positions. Nppd is represented at the SES level by our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity and Communications, who co-leads the Cybersecurity Workforce Coordinating Council. I support the council as Nppd's human capital expert. Nppd's cybersecurity managers and employees at the working level are also engaged in numerous working groups and focus groups to inform the design and impact of the new system. We believe that our needs are well represented and our input is valued. In my role as HR Director for Nppd, I have made data analytics a priority. As an organization, we cannot figure out where we're going, what barriers exist, or develop effective solutions without first understanding what is working and what is not working in our efforts to recruit and retain cyber talent. Over the last year, we have invested a lot of energy and effort in developing our metrics, such as stats on internal movement, location of lag times in hiring, grade distribution, et cetera, and analyzing our processes. We're now utilizing that data to determine what gaps exist and develop new strategies to address them. Nppd has also been very adept at and creative in leveraging the various authorities granted to us, as well as existing OPM regulations and workplace flexibilities to attract and retain our talent. We're actively exercising various hiring authorities, such as direct hire, internships, and non-competitive hiring, incentive programs such as student loan repayment and retention incentives, and recruitment strategies such as social media and on-site interviewing to attract and retain our cyber workforce. We will continue to do so and provide those insights into the development of the new personnel system. I want to conclude my testimony by thanking the committee for passing the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Act of 2017. Earlier today, your colleagues in the Senate took the next step to move this bill forward. If enacted, this legislation will mature and streamline Nppd. Importantly, it will rename our organization to clearly reflect our essential mission. Establishing a brand under a renamed agency is essential to our workforce, our recruitment efforts, and effective stakeholder engagement. We must ensure that Nppd is appropriately organized to address cybersecurity threats, both now and in the future. And we appreciate this committee's leadership. Thank you for your interest in growing and developing the nation's cybersecurity workforce, and I look forward to your questions as well.
Thank you, Ms. Moss. We'll turn now to questions from the members. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Garrett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am incredibly frustrated, and I have a finite amount of time. And Mr. Will Hewson, I presume I'm close to pronouncing that correctly. You're going to miss the brunt of this because you're from GAO. You attended the Naval Academy. You understand the concept that a leader is responsible for all a unit accomplishes or fails to accomplish, right? They taught that in the Army leadership. I'm sure the Navy's no different. And Ms. Bailey, you said our enemies will not rest and neither will we. But as I look at this list of GAO findings, there were at least 395 nights that we went to bed and rested before we accomplished items on this list. So you have people on this committee, Ms. Demings, who has a career in law enforcement, so too Mr. Higgins, Chairman McCall, who was a federal prosecutor, Mr. Perry, who was in the military. We have an FBI agent. I was in the military and was a prosecutor, and I can guarantee you that there were a lot of nights that we had stuff that we were mandated to do that we didn't go to bed, that we literally didn't rest because we were mandated to do it. So I look at Public Law 113-277, and I look at these bullets: establish procedures identifying and categorizing cybersecurity positions within 90 days, March of 2015, 13 months behind. Identify all positions with cyber functions and determine specialty areas within 9 months. Still incomplete. Assign 2-digit codes to all cybersecurity positions based on priority work category within 9 months. Incomplete. Identify cybersecurity, and this is from September 2015. Identify cybersecurity work rules to the critical needs of Congress, June 2016. Not yet identified. There's one more. Report critical needs to OPM annually, assigned September 2016. Not yet addressed. Now, I got a series of questions for each of you, and again, you escaped this, and again, thank you for your service, right? I know what you do isn't easy. But if our enemies aren't resting, and they're not, I just was fortunate enough to meet with the foreign ministers from the Baltic states, right, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, who understand something about cyber attacks. I've spoken with people from the Ukraine who understand something about cyber attacks. I understand that there are a lot of people who are concerned with things like EMP. The reality is, as you all know, a cascading cyber threat could kill 50% of the population in this country in 12 months. And I'm not making this stuff up. So these are the laws passed by Congress under the Constitution of the United States, and here are my questions, and I'm going to give them to you in a litany and then give each of you time. What is your level of accountability? What is your fear if you miss a date established by law? What's the worst thing you think can happen? When was the last time someone was fired for not accomplishing a task mandated by law? I'm dead serious. I want to know who and what did they fail to do? Has anyone who was previously responsible for a legally mandated task subsequently been promoted after having failed to accomplish that task in a timely manner? I'm dead serious. Because in the world from which I come, as a prosecutor, as an elected official, and as a soldier, you get an assignment with a drop-dead date, and you do the assignment. You guys are great. I apologize that my enmity is attacking you, but we serve the American people, and these threats are not anything to worry about until they happen. So has anyone who was responsible for one of these tasks that hasn't been accomplished subsequently been promoted, who failed to accomplish the task, and what were they promoted to, and why? So again, what's your level of accountability? What's your greatest fear that could happen possibly if you don't do something Congress directs you by law to do? Have we promoted anyone who failed to accomplish these tasks? And what do we intend to do to be more responsive in the future? I hate to think that it's like being the parent to a 17-year-old who goes, yes, sir, I'll do it, then never does it and giggles behind your back. Because Congress is supposed to matter. And I think in our hearts we want the same thing. So I'm sorry, about 45 seconds for each of you. And then thank you for your indulgence. And again, it's not a personal attack, but I mean, you get it. You all know this is wrong. 13, 16, 18 months out.
I was scrambling to write down your questions, sir. So
okay, well, here's my biggest one. Has anyone failed to accomplish a legally mandated task by virtue of Public Law 113-277 been subsequently promoted?
No, sir.
Has anyone ever been fired for failure to make a timeline mandated by law by Congress?
No.
And so what's the greatest fear of an individual who's tasked with these particular responsibilities should they fail to accomplish that task? What's their fear? I won't get promoted. In the Army, it was, I want a good evaluation so that I can get promoted ahead of my peers. What's the fear of someone who goes home one night thinking, well, I'm not going to finish this today, knowing that it's past the deadline?
I think if I could answer it this way, I don't know that it's fear. I think it's actually just disappointment that they don't have the ability to perhaps get everything done in a given day that they try to get it done. And so they've got a lot of competing priorities sitting on their plate, and this is by far one of their most important, but they have to do that in context of everything else that they're trying to do at the same time. So the very same workforce that's trying to do the coding, and which, by the way, we have, as of today, over 6,000 positions are coded in the 3-digit. I realize that that's not the substantial progress that you're looking for, but—
And I want progress. Pardon, I'm not trying to be mean to you, and I know I'm over. I want completion by the assigned date, or you coming to us going, here's why we're not going to finish in time.
Understand, sir.
And again, I'm not trying to beat you guys up.
And we have a timeline.
I know it's not easy.
So.
Okay, again, I thank you, the chair, for his indulgence. But please take the sense of urgency. This is a bipartisan thing where we're protecting the same people. We need to be better about holding you to account, and you need to be better about looking at this time and going, darn, this is hard. We're going to get it done. Because that's what we do in law enforcement. That's what we do in the military. That's what our teachers do when they're first-year teachers lesson planning. That's what we owe the citizens we serve. Thank you. I apologize for going over.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question to DHS. My colleague stated the issues, and I've given you flexibility. We've given you incentives to hire folks, to get people online, to fill these vacancies. And Ms. Bailey, you pointed out there's, you know, a lot of, sounds like you don't have the resources. Individuals that are supposed to execute just aren't getting around to executing. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but my question to you is, what other resources do you need to fill these vacancies? And of course, the other question, if you can, there's some errors, I would imagine errors in coding of some of these positions. Do we know how many vacancies we actually have? Ms. Moss, Ms. Bailey, please.
In terms of hiring, I looked at our numbers right before while preparing for this, and over the last 2 years, we have approximately 1087 cyber positions. We actually hired over 500 during that time frame. So we are actually hiring a lot of people throughout the course of the last few years. We also are suffering attrition along with the rest of the cyber workforce in government and out of government. So although hiring is occurring, attrition is also occurring. So it's not that we're not hiring individuals, we're also trying to overcome the deficit.
That's a plausible explanation. So my question is, how do we get you over? How do we help you get there to make sure that we're fully staffed in this critical area of government?
I'm not certain that any new legislation is needed. We are implementing, as Ms. Bailey said, a new cyber talent management system. I think will give us more flexibilities. We're also hiring people that are younger interns that we're growing and developing within the organization. So I think that will help shape our workforce. When Nppd first stood up, the urgency was to hire people that are competent and skilled. There's a limited number of people that are competent and skilled in cyber talent. So now we're trying to grow people from within by hiring people at lower grade levels.
Ms. Moss and Ms. Bailey, I'm not going to put any words in your mouth, but it sounds to me that you're going through a growth process here, and it's still going to take time to get there?
We are growing, yes.
It's a critical area, and we're still going to have some problems getting there. What about the issue of miscoding of some of these positions? Do we actually know how many positions are vacant, or is that something that's still a floating number out there?
We actually know how many positions are vacant. We're in the process now of updating our coding to the 3-digit code. So we are training our managers on how to use the new NICE framework to code their positions. So that's underway currently as we speak.
Same question to the GAO, sir. In your opinion, what can we do to speed up hiring of some of these folks to see these most important positions that we need to have filled right away?
I think one of the first things is to identify what your critical needs are, to make sure that you're hiring the right people with the
prioritizing
that you need. Prioritizing.
Can we do that, or is that?
Well, that's one of the things that have yet to be done.
Has failed to be done.
Identify the specialty areas of critical need, and so I think that's going to be key. Is being able to know what type of staff, what type of skill sets you need, and then go out and try to hire them. And recognize that's going to be challenging in terms of hiring those types of individuals, because they are in demand, not only across federal agencies, but also in the private sector. So it's going to really be imperative to make sure that we know exactly what type of individual with the skill sets that we need in order to accomplish our mission. And that's one of the steps that DHS still needs to do.
I'd like to look at both of these agencies, come up with a list of recommendations to what is it that we need to do to help you get there to finish your job. Again, this is not a finger pointing, but rather trying to figure out what the bottlenecks are and trying to move past them. Mr. Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bailey, I'm looking at some information from the GAO study here that says that as a requirement of the Act of 2014, your agency is supposed to assign the 2-digit employment codes, and that, as far as I can tell per this, it's still ongoing. Now, I understand there's subsequent legislation that requires a 3-digit code. So in light of that, are you still trying to assign the 2-digit codes, or have you abandoned that and now are moving to the 3-digit code, or is there a reason to have both? Where does that?
Yes, sir. So the 3-digit code builds off the 2-digit code, and what it does is it just makes it a further refinement, I think is the best way to describe
Okay.
it. So the 2-digit code work it has continued, always will continue. What we're doing is refining that by adding in the 3-digit code.
So when you say, I just want to understand this, and when you say always will continue, does that mean it'll never be done, or?
Correct. Our cyber workforce, as people move in and out, as positions move in and out, as our enemy comes up with new and advanced ways of doing things, we're always going to be redefining what it is to be cybersecurity.
Okay, so I agree with you, and I get that, and I figured that would be your answer. But at some point, you have a base of information, and then you're modifying from that to keep up with the current times, right? I mean,
Correct.
So to me, at some point, everything's going to be assigned a 2- or 3-digit code, everything, and then you're going to have to change it to keep up. So my question is, when is that going to happen? Because the due date was September of 15 for the 2-digit code. It's March of 18 right now. So
Right. We have assigned, I just want to clarify something. Although we have not provided, I think what you'd say, formal guidance and everything, we have been at this since 2011. And so we meet on almost a monthly basis and working with the components to put together the kinds of guidance that they actually need, which is why Ms. Moss is able to continue on. They're not sitting around waiting on formal guidance. So by April, the end of April 2018, which would be next month, this department will have all of its cyber positions coded under the 3-digit code. We have a commitment to do that. We've talked to both the DAS and the Undersecretary within management, along with component leadership, and everybody understands that this is something that we have got to finalize by April of 2018.
So that we're talking about at the end of April, because we're talking a month
Yes.
away, less than a month away. So you're
Correct.
saying at the end of April, this is
the
not
end
going
of
to be an
April.
issue, at least this component of it.
Correct.
Which look, I think it's way too long. I empathize with Mr. Garrett's position because I feel the same way. It just takes too long. We had a hearing last week regarding the hiring practices, including for cybersecurity positions, and as it relates to the fitness determination as a part of the onboarding process. And what I came away with is that the department, this is my impression, for whatever reason, has some aversion to risk of hiring somebody, and if there's anything at all that is flagged, they just drag their feet. The contractor can't find out what the problem is. Nobody knows what the fitness standard is. There's nothing published. It's amorphous. It changes from position to position. It costs the American taxpayer a huge amount of money, and it puts everybody further and further behind. And this cybersecurity issue is an issue, believe it or not. I imagine other members do. I go home to my district and people ask me about it. They're concerned about it, and then they want to know what they can do and what's being done. And quite honestly, I don't have a lot of good answers for them. So what I also got out of that hearing is there's nothing required legislatively for the department to change its procedures and practices. I see absolutely no reason why the contracting officer needs to be involved in that part of the process. Right? The contracting officer makes sure that the contract is fit and that the contractor is performing the work as appropriate. He doesn't need to be involved, he or she doesn't need to be involved in the hiring process, yet would-be contractor has to go to them to find out what the issue is, why they can't hire somebody. They go to somebody else, and then they come back and they say, well, we can't tell you, and we don't know when it's going to get better, and we can't tell you why. Why can't you? Why can't you? You're the Chico, right? That's the
Yes, sir.
Chief Human Capital Officer. That's you.
Right.
Why can't you just change that and streamline that? That we put you in charge because you're smart, you're capable, and you can make decisions. Why is that not happening?
Well, if it's contractors, it doesn't actually fall under.
But the process,
mine.
the process of hiring.
Right, and so the process of hiring, yes, does fall under me, but I partner with our chief security officer
Okay.
with regard to that.
Who's in charge? You or the security officer?
With regard to the security process, it would be Rich McComb, our chief security officer. But we have partnered. I will tell you, in the 2 years since I have been at DHS, we've issued reciprocity guidance that has gone out to everyone. We're now at a 70 to 80% of our cases in which we can do reciprocity, we actually do it. We've issued guidance to say that if somebody's not going to be able to pass their security clearance and you know that, then revoke the offer and move on to the next
But this is
person.
before the clearance, right? This is before this is fitness. These are the fitness standards, and I forget the other ones. One's for contractors and one for employees.
Right.
And with all due respect, the hearing I had last week tells me that whatever process you implemented 2 years ago is not sufficiently working, with all due respect. It's not,
Okay.
So I would invite you to revisit that. I'm happy to have a discussion with you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Demings, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. It's a tough job, but I do share the sense of urgency with my colleagues. It's an important job. I was in another place this morning talking about we have enemies in this country who spend every waking minute trying to figure out how they can defeat our systems, and so this is an important work. Ms. Bailey, you indicated that you're not sitting around waiting for guidance, but I would think that some guidance would be helpful in terms of recruiting and training and retaining, preparing our current workforce. So could you please describe for the committee any guidance that has been developed and dispersed at the department to assist in identifying cyber workforce needs?
Yes, I mean, what I should have said is the components weren't sitting around waiting for formal guidance. So, but with regard to the guidance, we have actually, in working with the Human Capital Leadership Council, we have put out several, at least 15 different pieces of guidance, quite frankly, on what are all the hiring authorities that you can use today? What are some of the best recruiting methods that we can actually use? How do we go ahead and retain these folks, given the authorities that we currently have in place today? What are the things that we need to, that we know that we need to actually implement with regard to our new personnel system and where we want to go? So we actually have been holding design sessions with the subject matter experts along with the hiring or the HR specialists to actually make sure that we're identifying what the specific needs are. Because we do know what our critical needs are. We have over 33 different specialty areas that have been identified for cybersecurity, which ranges within 40 different occupations. We're using a 21st century NICE framework of coding. And then we have to take that after we code these positions, we have to turn around and try to recruit, hire, and pay people on a first part of the 20th century system, because the two aren't actually matched together. So while we have all this good coding that's going on over here, and it is absolutely critical and it is important, we have to live in the system in which we have to operate under today. So when I go out and we try to recruit somebody, we have a question that we ask ourselves all the time. How are you going to get top talent when in some cases, if they have a bachelor's degree, they are only equivalent to a GS-5, which means that I can only pay them about $3 more than the minimum wage in most states. So we are absolutely going to have a recruiting problem when we have those kinds of pay scales associated with the GS schedule, which is why we have put a tremendous amount of effort into designing this new personnel system that we plan to roll out in the very near future. We have to go through the regulatory process, make sure that everything is aligned. We have briefed OMB on it, we have briefed the CIO Council at the White House on it, and we brief OPM on it next week. So we're making significant progress.
So you're encouraged by the new process that you hope to roll out very
extremely
soon.
encouraged, because what we have done is we have said we live in a 21st century world. We can no longer just put Band-Aids on a 20th century system and call it a day, because it's not working. So if we're going to do all this work over here in coding and the 21st century codes, which make absolutely perfect sense, makes no sense to me whatsoever that we have to turn around and try to recruit, hire, and retain and pay people in a system that was designed in the 1940s. And so those are some of the things that we're actually working on together to make sure that we can get implemented.
Ms. Moss, anything you'd like to add to that statement?
I would say, in terms of actual operations, that's certainly true. We have a hard time. We do leverage OPM flexibilities in terms of recruitment incentives, retention incentives, but that's a paper process, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through, so that elongates our hiring process. So we have found workarounds, but we're looking for a long-term solution, which we are going to get with the new system that's being developed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Donovan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you answered most of my questions just now, because the chairman held a roundtable with some of the people from industry a while back, and we had folks from Microsoft, Intel, Facebook, Google, a couple other companies. And just to put things in perspective, you're talking to a guy whose VCR still flashes 12. So I don't understand any of the stuff. But they told us the difficulty they're having recruiting, that they have 500,000 jobs right now that they can't fill, and they think in 10 years it'll be 1 million. And they're looking to start trying to get interest in young people into the jobs that are going to be needed to be filled by industry. I can't even imagine how difficult it is for you to recruit at the pay scales. You know, in some places, and many of my colleagues here have served in the military, and military seems to have difficulty, but some incentives to retain talent, and especially special areas that are needed. Is there a category for like essential services in our government that we could get added a GS classification ratings and say, you know, this is a need that we have to fill in, and maybe we don't follow those protocols, as you said, Ms. Bailey, that was set up in 1940. Is there a mechanism in place now for that?
Well, actually, Congress gave us, thank you, gave us that authority to actually write our own rules. And so what we are doing right now is we are completely not just reinvigorating, we are redesigning and stepping away from the traditional classification and qualification system, because it does not work for what we're trying to hire today. And I will tell you, with respect to the military, in fact, Nppd has over a 50% of Nppd's staff in this area are veterans. So that is remarkable. And it is a highly sought after source for us to recruit from, is from the veteran population. But thank you to the Congress. We do have the authority now to go ahead and actually do what you're suggesting, because we're never going to be able to make the significant progress we want to make by putting another step on the GS, right? Or by raising something by just 1 degree. That's never going to work. You have to rethink. First of all, the talent that we're trying to hire does not want a 30-year career with the federal government. They just don't. That's okay. And so we have to figure out ways to have legislation, which it would necessarily take for in the competitive side. But with our new authority that we've been given, we're actually baking into that this ability for folks to go in and out of government, so without having to be restrained by time and grade and all the ridiculous rules that folks are under these days that really actually is a detraction for them to actually want to come back into the government. We want them to work for us for 3 to 5 years. We want them to leave and go to the companies that you just mentioned. But then we want to stay in touch with them, and we want to bring them back so that we can have this infusion of both private sector and federal sector. And that's what our new personnel system will actually allow us to do.
The other thought I had was possibly if, you know, industry, again, is having their own difficulties in recruiting. But I don't know if you would call it on a loan basis or something, but the real talented people who are getting paid these very reasonable salaries in the private sector would be able to come in and work for their government as a I don't want to say a loaner from J.P. Morgan, but you know a program where we could take some talent from industry and for some, whether it's a love of country or whatever incentive we could give companies to loan us some of their talented people to help us in some of the things that you're dealing with might be another idea. Mr. Chairman, after Ms. Bailey, I'll yield the remainder of my time. Yes, Ms. Bailey, would you comment on it?
I was just going to say that, yes, like the loaned executive program is something that we use. We also bring folks in on what's called a IPA, which is basically academic talent and stuff. So there are different hiring authorities that we can use to have an infusion of that talent come in. And we do make use of those. So
wonderful. Thank you very much. I yield the remainder of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Sheila Jackson-Lee, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman very much, and I appreciate very much this particular hearing. I want to thank the full committee, the subcommittee chair and subcommittee ranking member, and full committee chair and full committee ranking member on working with me on my zero-day legislation, which I think is the underpinning of what we're talking about in terms of having that staff that experienced staff to deal with the ultimate events that may happen both in the public sector and the private sector, and having them be qualified and having a continuing channeling of staff. And I'd like to staff personnel that are dealing with the issue of cybersecurity, which some years ago, Mr. Chairman, as you well know, cybersecurity was under Transportation Security and Infrastructure. And we began looking at where cyber impacts us, which is everywhere, from water systems, sewer systems, the electric grid, and beyond. So I believe that it's important to take note of a number of statistics that I hope to get a hearing on particular legislation that I have. Just like to cite, the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2016 reported that African Americans comprise only 3% of the information security analysts in the U.S., yet comprise 13% of the population. The numbers at one time, top computing security salaries, 175,000, 230,000. I think we had positions in the government at 88,000. 2017, the U.S. employed nearly 780,000 people in cybersecurity positions, with approximately 350,000 vacancies. In 2017, nearly 65% of large U.S. companies have a chief information security officer, which is good. It's up from 50%. Women hold only 11% of cybersecurity positions globally, while filling 25% of tech jobs and comprising 50% of the population. There is a similar situation with African Americans, Hispanics, who account for 5% of the cybersecurity positions, African Americans 7%. Those numbers are simply to look or give us the parameters of space that we should be in our recruiting and our collaboration on the question of providing a pathway for individuals. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm interested in having a hearing on H.R. 1981, the Cybersecurity Education Workforce Enhancement Act, which I've introduced. But I do want to ask both Ms. Bailey and Ms. Moss, and I want to thank Mr. Wilhusen for his product of DHS needs to take urgent action to identify its position in critical skills requirements. So I see that there is a beginning structure that you all are working on. This legislation penetrates outside of the immediate need and begins to build a farm team. And so recruiting information assurance cybersecurity and providing computer security professionals, this particular office would be called the Office of Cybersecurity Education Awareness Branch, providing grants training and other support for kindergarten through grade 12, secondary and post-secondary computer security education programs, guest lecturer programs, identifying youth training programs, developing programs to support the underrepresented, and working with a number of organizations that would have outreach to those organizations. So, Ms. Bailey and Ms. Moss, I would hope that those kinds of outreach, though you may have them, having them more established and getting the farm team established that will ultimately fit into the scheme of young people coming in from a diverse background, staying a couple of years, and then going out and coming back in, which I think is an excellent model. Could you work with that added outreach that my legislation speaks of?
I'll start, and then Rita can elaborate on this a little bit more. So the answer is yes. We actually have been having these conversations with regard to where do you start the outreach? Where do you actually start the recruiting? I'm of the belief that really we need to start this actually in elementary school, and then we need to build it from there. The public school systems are actually begging us to help them establish what the curriculum is that we need for these folks to be successful, because not everybody's going to be on a 2 or a 4-year college track. Some are going to come straight out of high school. But when we have a system today that when you come out of high school, the most that you can probably make is around minimum wage. It's not going to help them sustain or actually be able to support their families or anything else. And so if we're going to hire from all segments of society, which is what our basic merit principles require, as part of the statute, then I think that we really need to your point, we need to establish programs and such in which we can actually attract from all segments of society.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
so
Moss.
getting into the schools, I think, is important.
Thank you. Ms. Moss?
Okay. Yes, cybersecurity education is part of our mission at Nppd, so we're certainly passionate about that, and we're happy to see that you're passionate about it as well. In the meantime, one of the things that we've started doing is looking at the Scholarship for Service, Pathway Intern programs to reach out to a more diverse population of students. So we're using those tools right now to leverage diversity across our cyber workforce.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm prepared to yield back. I wanted to ask unanimous consent to put H.R. 1981 in the record.
Without objection.
And would further encourage discussions about hearings on the very points that the two witnesses have made that expands the opportunity. I just mentioned coding is something that can be taught out of high school, and they can go into a very, very productive employment that would have young people supporting families and being very productive. So I look forward to it. I thank the witnesses very much for their testimony. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the Americans before us for testifying today. Ms. Bailey, thank you for your service. In your written statement, you identified 3 priorities, the second of which was to recruit and retain highly qualified employees with capabilities vital to mission success. The relationship with DHS in your effort to recruit and retain, is there any mechanism to recruit out of our college campuses?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Can you share that with us, please?
So with regard to our college campuses, some of the things that we make sure that we do is last year alone, we actually spoke to over 1,300 students at 122 different universities and colleges across the United States, and that includes both 2-year and 4-year colleges. So to that extent,
that's encouraging. That's the answer we anticipated and hope to hear. It states that DHS has reported at least 12 or 15 components as having cybersecurity positions. However, DHS cannot provide data to show the actual numbers of positions in each of these categories in specialty areas. So how are we, and this means you, how are you connecting the dots between the jobs that you're discussing with our students at American universities and connecting the location of the residence of these young Americans to the jobs that would be associated in the specialty areas of cybersecurity if you don't know what those specialty areas are? How are you having a complete conversation with a young American that's, say, a sophomore or junior in college and would consider entering a career with DHS and serving their country in that way? And might I add that money for a soldier, a sailor, airman, or Marine is not the motivating factor of serving. It's service to country. And I'd suggest that service in protecting our homeland should be reflective of that same patriotic spirit. And I believe these positions can be filled despite the lack of funding as it's referred to today. And if we can appeal to the patriotic spirit of young Americans in colleges. These are the young men and women that are coming out of there, which are 21st century cyber skills that none of us have. So if you haven't been able to identify the specialty positions within the various components of DHS, then how are you having a complete conversation with a young American man or woman at a college university in Louisiana or Alabama or Florida or California?
well, sir, we have identified. We have identified that we have over 33 specialty areas. We have mapped them to the NICE framework. What we have not done timely is coded all those positions into our payroll system and make sure that we've accounted for them. But we have done that work. We know exactly what our specialty areas are. We know exactly where the then we've had to map those against the 40 different occupational series. So we know exactly what it is that we need. We know where those positions are in every single component. We know that the top series are things like IT specialists, info, computer forensics, coders, law enforcement. We have a law enforcement element of this. We have intel analysts that are part of this, and we have management and program analysts, just to name a few.
That's also an encouraging answer. So you're helping us here. Fill in some blanks. Let me just ask, if I'm a student in the IT field at University of Louisiana in Lafayette, one of the top IT universities in the country, and there's a component of DHS in my area where I live, and I speak to a recruiter for DHS, can you identify a job for me when I graduate in 2019 or 2020 that I may want to pursue? Because it takes, from our hearing last week, it takes a year to get hired. So if I wanted to pursue that job, can you connect me with that job if I'm a student right now at a university in America?
Absolutely. And to what Ms. Moss was speaking about, that's where we use things like the Pathways program, which is the internship program. So we can actually hire that student out of the university, as you suggested. We can hire them today. We can get them trained. They can work for us over the summers. They can work for us on their spring breaks, their winter breaks. And then at the end of that, we can, what's called convert them today, convert them full-time into the position of which we need into that future.
All right, well, these are encouraging answers. I have several other questions. Mr. Chairman, permission to submit my answers in writing to the witnesses. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of our witnesses for your testimony here today on a very important topic. Ms. Bailey and Ms. Moss, I know that we've touched on the topic I'm going to address on workforce, but in your testimony describes DHS initiatives to accelerate recruiting and hiring for cybersecurity professionals and to retain cyber staff through financial incentives. Yet DHS cannot hire its way out of its workforce shortages, obviously, nor can it hope to compete with private sector on compensation. So what investments is DHS making to train its workforce and to develop cybersecurity skills in-house?
At Nppd, one of the things that we utilize is the NICE framework to identify certifications that are critical for success of the cyber mission. And so we incentivize our employees to get those certifications through retention incentives. We currently have a number of employees, I would say a majority of our cybersecurity workforce, that get incentives to get certain certifications. So we are very much encouraging certification and additional training for our cyber workforce.
We then used that, their excellent work that they did, and we actually rolled this out department-wide, because one of the things we wanted to make sure of is that within the cybersecurity community, within DHS, that we didn't have the haves and the have-nots. And so we took the excellent work that Nppd did, and we worked with our cyber council, with the component leadership, and we, to Ms. Moss's point, we actually have identified all the kinds of certifications, whether it's, specific ones to a cyber, or it's things like critical thinking, decision-making, teamwork, those kinds of things, because they go hand in hand with this. And so we made sure that we outlined everything that we expect of our workforce, and then we provide that through their individual development plans, and then through tuition assistance and things like that, to ensure that they get the accreditation that we actually need for them to accomplish their mission.
Okay, thank you. And what about investments in, what investments is DHS making into rotational job assignments to develop and retain cybersecurity staff?
I'm sorry, sir, vocational?
Rotational.
Oh, rotational?
Yeah, sorry.
Do you know if you're? Okay, so for rotational, we were just conversing here just to see which, rotational assignments Actually, what we just started was a joint duty program, which is an excellent way for us to do these rotational assignments, to take people even sometimes outside of their cybersecurity and introduce them maybe to law enforcement or introduce them to intelligence or human resources for that matter. Because what we're really trying to do is create well-rounded professionals that can perform a variety of functions within DHS. So we also do have a robust rotational program as well, and that includes rotations inside DHS and outside DHS. But we're large enough and our components are diverse enough that we can really provide folks with a very robust rotational experience that gives them, I think, things that would be needed for their career advancement.
Have you considered expanding those experiences to include positions in state government, for example? I know that my state of Rhode Island and other states around the country are hungry for DHS professionals to come in and both allow them to learn from state experience and what the challenge they're facing, and as well as learning from DHS staff.
Well, I'll take that back, sir. It's an excellent idea. We just kind of got it going, but I tell you, folks are extremely excited about this, so I'll be glad to take that back.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I would also add, I'm surprised Ms. Bailey didn't mention this because we've talked about it several times. As part of the new cyber personnel system, part of that will be project management, project-based assignments. So that's going to be a huge part of the new cyber personnel system as well. That's a concept for that program.
Great, thank you. Ms. Bailey, I know that many of the members here, including the chairman, are supporters of the Scholarship for Service program run by NSF and OPM and the department. And I've certainly been consistently impressed by the caliber of participants and alumni in the program that I've met. And I must say that the annual DC Job Fair, in fact, it's one of my favorite events to attend. How has SFS students helped alleviate the cyber workforce deficit facing the department?
Well, I'm going to let Rita speak to the specifics because Nppd knocks it out of the park when it comes to SFS. It is something that, clear back to whenever I worked even in the Department of Defense, was something that I've been a huge supporter of. And so you are absolutely right. This is high caliber folks that we've been able to get in, and it is starting to, I think, chip away, especially at the entry level. We're using this quite significantly.
And we've participated in the virtual job fairs and the in-person job fairs and have been able to hire on the spot a number of individuals into this program. We do not have the long-term results of that yet, but it's very effective in terms of getting them in and familiarizing them with our mission and DHS.
Very good, thank you. I know that when I've been to those job fairs, as you just pointed out, the offering jobs on the spot, we've had some 75 or 80 government departments and agencies there with actual job offers, and have hired pretty quickly. So great opportunity for these young people, and we're getting return on investment by having them in the government for a period of time as a part of their payback for their Scholarship for Service program. So I have other questions, Mr. Chairman, that I'll submit for the record, but thank you, and I'll yield back.
Thank the gentleman. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Shusun, I want to start with you. You know, both the government and the private sector use the NICE framework to chart out work roles so that cybersecurity workers, as well as the people responsible for hiring them, can better develop their career paths in cybersecurity. Your report, the GAO report, points to misalignments between what DHS has identified as a skill gap and the specialty areas in the NICE framework. For instance, the DHS work role entitled Development Operations is related to 12 different specialty areas in the NICE framework. So I guess my question is, since the overarching goal is matching DHS work roles with the NICE framework and not the other way around, shouldn't DHS maybe consider changing the categorization of the specialty areas to reflect that and to simplify the process?
Well, the specialty areas are actually part of the National Cybersecurity Framework that the NICE program and NIST has set up, and that is one that is in use throughout the entire federal government. what DHS has done is identified, I guess, the competencies and proficiency levels as part of its technical capability gaps in its program. And there is, you're correct, between those competencies, I guess a one-to-many relationship. I think DHS has come up with a mapping, if you will, from our conversion table, from their competencies to the work and specialty areas of the NICE program. And it's the reason why I guess the specialty areas are important in categorizing the positions according to that is the fact that that is something that provides a common lexicon and something that can be used throughout the federal government as well as throughout the department. And so that was one of the reasons why OPM and indeed the law requires agencies to use the specialty areas identified in the NICE National Cybersecurity Framework for identifying their cybersecurity positions.
Okay, thanks for that. Ms. Bailey, you said something, and I want to make sure that the record is clear, because I thought it was maybe inconsistent with what I read in this report. So on page 8 of the report, it says, as of November of 2017, the department had not completed identifying all of its cybersecurity positions, and it had not determined the work categories or specialty areas of the positions. That's from the report. Did I hear you testify differently?
We have gone through and we have identified the 33 different specialty areas and used this crosswalk and mapped things to that. So I think in some ways there's a smidge of a disagreement here perhaps with how it's being characterized. So for us, our positions, they are not all coded, but we have identified the positions that we're aware of. We have identified those positions. I think it was, I can't even remember the date, but we had almost 95% of the positions that were filled. And I think what, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what part of the issue here is that we hadn't actually identified our vacant positions. We had identified our filled positions. So of our filled positions, we had mapped those to the 33 different specialty areas, the critical need areas, and also then the 40 different occupations. So I just want to be careful in how I'm saying this, that of the positions that we coded and we took care of, we have mapped all of them against that.
Okay, I want to make sure that the record is clear. So is that smidge of a difference been accurately characterized in your opinion, Mr. Shusun?
I would say there's a couple things. One is Ms. Bailey is correct, is part of the reason why there's a difference between what was coded in terms of 95% versus 79% had to do with the vacant positions that were not being coded. But at the same time, we're still noting throughout the time that the number of cybersecurity positions were all supposed to be identified at a certain time by law. What we're finding is that these numbers keep increasing. For example, back in, and I think it was, let me just get the exact date here. It was back in December, I want to say, was it December 2016, they had identified about 10,725 cybersecurity positions. More recently, we saw a draft report where DHS has identified up to over 14,000 security positions. So part of that could be the vacancies that are now being recognized, but also I think it's the department is also expanding the identification of these cybersecurity positions throughout the department. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Moss, I want to wrap up and ask you a question. You've had a number of questions from other members about cyber workforce development and how that ties into educational efforts. So I wanted to get on the record, and I don't, if someone asked you this specifically, I didn't catch it, but I'm interested to hear how your office works with Seeker, the Stakeholder Engagement and Cyber Infrastructure Resilience office in its education and outreach efforts, and how or whether those enhance the cybersecurity initiatives in your organization.
Seeker is heavily involved in the Centers for Academic Excellence, which is the driver for the Scholarship for Service program. And as I noted before, we are heavily engaged in the Scholarship for Service, and we do a lot of hiring surrounding Scholarship for Service. There's one other point. Also with the NICE framework, they're involved in the development of the NICE framework, identifying the certifications that are important for the cyber mission. And as I noted, we use those certifications to incentivize our folks through incentive pay.
Terrific. Okay. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate your testimony, and I thank the members for being here and for their questions. As you've heard, members of the committee do have some additional questions for some of you, so we'll ask them to submit those and ask you to respond to those in writing. And pursuant to the committee rule 7D, the hearing record will remain open for a period of 10 days. And
Mr. Chair, before you adjourn, just a couple of comments, if I may.
You bet.
I just wanted to reiterate my question, which is how can we help you get there? How can we help you do your job? And number two, hopefully we'll have another committee hearing soon to follow up and how we can help DHS fulfill their mission. Thank you.
You bet. I think that's a sentiment that's been expressed by a number of members, but I appreciate the gentleman's comments. And with that, that'll conclude our hearing. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.